everyone. Welcome to the Money Store. My name is AJ, and this is a channel where we talk about La Luz del Mundo and other occurrences around it. Today, I have a presentation on the question, the idea of the system is corrupt, and my central question is, what does La Luz del Mundo mean when it, and by it I mean its spokespeople, it's sort of it's common members as they are given information and talking points by other people. What does it mean when there's this idea that the system is corrupt? And that is sort of broadly speaking, but I'll break it down as I go on, and I want to take it and I want to address it from a number of different angles. And I have some notes, and we'll get through this. And I want to know what your thoughts are. So be sure to engage with this video and all the free and appreciated ways that are available, such as liking, commenting, trying to get this on other people's feeds in order to fill that gap that I continue to identify that there's some English material that is missing on YouTube in regards to La Luz del Mundo. And I'm someone who has read quite a bit on the group, more beyond the news reports, and I continue to gather as much information and resources and books, certain materials as I can. I'm still trying to get through. I'm still trying to get through some, and I'm still looking for others. But I appreciate people reaching out to me to help with this magnet that I have going on, trying to gather as much written and academic or otherwise news or otherwise material that is out there. So yeah, be sure to interact with this. I would appreciate your help with this. And what you think of these questions that I have going on. So here's the PDF. It is titled, the central guiding question is, what does it mean when La Luz del Mundo says that the system is corrupt? La Luz del Mundo has its own history and its own characteristics that, I'm not going to go over from their perspective, but, I'm just going to assume that you have some sort of familiarity with it, and I'll discuss certain points as I go along. So number one, the sort of number one thing that I think of with regard to La Luz del Mundo and its familiarity, closeness to the criminal justice system, to local authorities, to national authorities, its relationship to investigative authorities, etc. Before addressing what these images are on the right, broadly speaking, we can say that La Luz del Mundo members, some of them are encouraged to go to school and become lawyers and engage in whatever lawyering that they can, right? But there is also this fact that La Luz del Mundo has, and I'm pretty sure this continues to stand, where its members cannot be police officers, where its members cannot be part of local authorities or even serve in the military. The founder of the church apparently, had a background in the military, and sometime since then, this has become a rule where people cannot be part of local authorities. But yet there is this other side of it where people can and are encouraged to, if in certain contexts, they can be lawyers, attorneys, what have you. Another thing that I want to discuss is that that La Luz del Mundo has since its inception and during and in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution, has always had some sort of oppositional stance towards religious influence in politics, and by that specifically they mean anti-Catholic, being suspicious of Catholic influence within politics. But nevertheless, La Luz del Mundo has its own politicians, and over time has accumulated some sort of some minor grip, at least, on political power and influence, and we'll go over that as certain images come along. But I want to address those things, and without giving that's sort of one starting point to keep in mind as we trek along through this. Now in addressing the images off to the right, let's say that there is also this phenomena of the church wherein members are actually not very prone. Our members are perhaps not very prone to being incarcerated for whatever reason. Members are very often characterized as not as not smoking, not drinking, and therefore, they don't fall for those sorts of issues under the law. And if anything, probably the number one not persecution, but tailing that they receive from the law could be with regard to immigration statuses in whatever country they're in, but most often in the U.S. So the average member, I would say, isn't probably very that doesn't have much experience with coming into contact with police and being in jail and whatnot. And even then, the church will very much try to maybe have some accommodations for people that get incarcerated, but there's maybe a stigma also amongst church members for when it comes to knowing that certain people were incarcerated at one point. And then, for example, think of if a member has tattoos or whatnot. So, there are those certain stigmas for people that do fall into the carceral system. But otherwise, one can conceive of the average member being less prone to coming into contact with the law in a negative way. And that's interesting because when Nason was arrested in June 2019, one of the first reactions that was floating around, and it was kind of one of my first reactions, but one of the first reactions that floated around was that this was perhaps some sort of immigration issue, that because he was in Mexico and then maybe flew into the United States. So, knowing that if one knew that he flew into the United States and he was arrested, then one could probably conceive that he just had some sort of issue with his immigration papers, and it was, something minor that had happened to him. But no, it turned out that what did occur was something much more serious, and therefore those sort of first reactions of giving him the benefit of the doubt that he was arrested, they make sense for why they happened, but of course, what had happened and what was alleged at that point was very, very serious, and so he got what was coming. But another thing I want to say with regard to this slide before moving on is that within the church there is also that because the leader, the apostle, whoever is in power, is very is close to church members, that truly cares about them in a whole bunch of ways, but also is very busy, and so he can't meet with everybody, but he knows a lot of people. But anyways, there is this one could say that there is this culture of silence within the church, wherein people that have wherein sort of legal disputes that can happen amongst members, amongst families within churches, etc. Those things, according to LLDM, ideally the first person to know and that can influence and guide the trajectory of the dispute, of the situation, would be the local minister. And so what I'm trying to describe is how these people can perhaps serve as a sort of dam or a wall for preventing or influencing things to not get into the eyes of local authorities that LLDM has whatever relationship with. But there is this idea of the culture of silence, and this culture or this intent, group intention to not bring sadnesses or distractions to the leader, to the apostle. Don't bring a bad eye to the group. Don't tarnish the group's collective reputation. So keep those things in mind. I hope this makes sense. I'll try to not repeat myself too much here, but I'm thinking in a number of different directions with regard to the church's relationship to local authorities and whatnot. And this next slide is interesting, but before I'll say that, I'm from here. I'm looking back to an incident that happened back in July 2021. Again, this is July 2021. This is 2 years after Nason was arrested. This is at sort of the tail end of the pandemic, of lockdown. And July 10th, 2021. This was on a weekend. This was in Houston, Texas. So basically what happened, and I hope, this is a good description of what happened. There was a family that attended the Houston church, or one of the branch churches. And then one of the family members within the church, Josue David Cordova, this person was upset at their family for continuing to be part of the church, and was retaliating, and he had said that they were brainwashed or anything like that. He felt that there was some sort of undue pressure or influence from the church coming between him and his family. If I have this correctly, then that was the sort of dynamic that was going on when the story broke out. I don't know if this person has actually been convicted or sentenced or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that this person has, and I haven't exactly looked for an update. Um, um, Let me know what you think if you happen to have any clarification on this so far. But yeah, I should look more into this to see what's going on with this person. But anyways, basically 3 years ago from the time of this recording, 3 years, a month, and almost a week ago, um, yeah, this person apparently pulls up to close to the offices that are on the side of the church in Houston, and he fires bullets, several bullets at the side of the building. He doesn't hurt anyone. Someone could have gotten hurt if they were close by, and if he was aiming in a different way. But basically, yeah, this person sort of just drove by, uh, allegedly, and gave some shots, and then eventually he was apprehended and pulled over at like down the street, or a half mile away, a mile away, something like that. It was a very quick incident, but local media reported on it and discussed it. I'm sure that the guy was arrested, and he's probably been convicted. He's probably serving time for this by now, but I'm not too sure on it. But basically, I believe that this happened. This is not the way to retaliate. I don't at all condone this. I think this is a very rash and unproductive way of expressing one's self, and dangerous. And this is not something I condone at all. But it's interesting because this was an instance where a very large church location did want, or at least court, the attention of local media, and did rely on the attention and the actions of local law enforcement and the judicial system and whatever else to take care of this person that was acting in a abhorrent way. So I back all that. I understand that, and it's interesting because, again, this is 2 years after the arrest of Nason, and then there are retaliatory things that can happen that can make church members feel like they're being targeted, persecuted, etc. And I totally understand that, because there are instances like this that happen, and I don't want anybody to get hurt. But it's important uh, to put them into context, and to sort of contrast this with the whole idea that the system is corrupt and whatnot. Well, it begs the question of at what level is the system corrupt? Is it just like the prosecutors in California, and then the supposed idea that the Catholic powers are behind it, and they're pulling strings, and they just want to hurt the church? Or is it just like, or is the system corrupt where like it's the authorities, and it's the mainstream media that has just a lot of documentaries and reports to put out on the church now, wherein the reputation is tarnished, and is that why it's corrupt? But anyways, this is interesting. I think that's all I have to say about this. And we'll move on from this. The next slide that I have here is more for discussion of what does it mean to feel persecuted. I don't deny that persecution happens. I certainly don't want it to happen in this way. I question the intentions of these people that I have pictured, of these actions that I have pictured here. But just to explain the images in these slides, I think these top two images are from two different churches in Mexico. And on the left here, you have some spray painting on the side of a church, very, very cheap and very quickly done, that says to pay taxes. We can investigate the exact specifics of that, but here's on the left we have another incident where someone spray paints "Fuera Aleluya," which means "go away, Aleluya," and Aleluya being a derogatory or a mean-spirited term that was utilized by other Mexicans or citizens, going decades back. I wonder how far back, but I know that people that are several decades old have told me that in the past, when they were children, that they were told this or called this with regard to living and growing up in Guadalajara or outside of Villahermosa Provincia, within and outside, around that sort of context is what I'm pointing at. So, such a term like that exists. and it is meant to mock church members because they say Alleluia, but this is just something to think about. I don't deny that persecutions and whatnot, happen, and I certainly don't condone them. This image that I have here on the bottom is from azcentral.com. So this takes place in Arizona, and I just took a very quick sentence of a screenshot of a sentence wherein I'll quote, church security teams reported seeing people throw eggs toward the church, but have not yet encountered vandalism serious enough to file a police report, Campos said. I don't know what Campos is, but here I'm just pointing at another sort of incidence of persecution that can happen to members wherein eggs are thrown at the church. I think I don't deny that this stuff happens, and it happens at different levels, but here are sort of instances where the church very much needs, and I don't condone this stuff, and I think it's right of them to want to report this stuff, or maybe not report it, or at least be on the lookout and be understanding of, or being aware that stuff like this can happen. I very much share in that, and I'm of the like mind, but I also want I want this to be in conversation with other things. And one last thing that I'll say is that I'm pretty sure that all these incidents from this slide and this slide for sure, and then these other slides, these are all incidents post the arrest of Nason in June 2019, and the persecution can go, certainly goes back decades, certainly goes back to the founding, but over time, there's been different relationships between the church and its idea of local authorities, of police, etc., police amongst its members. Before I move on, and before I forget, I will say that me growing up in my church location, I knew of at least one story where, as I was more grown up, and someone had told me that back in the day, a certain member was a police officer, and I was a kid. I guess I was a kid and I didn't know back then, but apparently this person that I knew at the present day, apparently in the past was a police officer and had to have conversations with the local minister to be convinced of not being in the police and seeking a different path, and that person did find a different path, a different career, and again, that's interesting. And that's interesting because I also knew other members, or at least one or two, that I think I can picture in my head, if I remember correctly, that continued to be police officers, that continued to be some sort of police, but they were very distant. They didn't attend very much, and so again, there is that sort of relationship with local authorities, local police, etc. But then there is also these attitudes, that they have that are kind of nuanced with regard to other greater powers, like for example, Javier Becerra, when he was the Attorney General, and he oversaw the arrest of Nason in June 2019. People are suspicious of him because he was a Catholic, etc., for example, and other reasons. But beyond that, people were also suspicious of Joe Biden, who ended up running for president in late, and won the race back in late 2020. And then after he was inaugurated in January 2021, Joe Biden brought in Javier Becerra from California to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, if I have that correctly. But I know he serves and can be considered to be part of Joe Biden's core team, his cabinet. So, keep that in mind. Javier Becerra at that level right now for the past almost 4 years has not been, going after La Luz del Mundo. He has been caught up in other matters. But such a person is aware, is at least aware of La Luz del Mundo, and can still remembers what was going on and what they oversaw. And but yet he's Catholic, and yet yet he's Catholic, yet also Joe Biden is Catholic, and so there may be some sort of strange attitude that La Luz del Mundo members have towards higher levels of government. And then also, to the judges that they had, with all the judges that oversaw Nason's case at one point or another. I didn't see much praising of judges from La Luz del Mundo spokespeople or commentators, etc. But I do want to say that when there were wins or positive outcomes at certain points in the trial, not, the pre-trial, and then, we never got to a trial, but, throughout that whole process of back and forth, there were points where they were winning or where positive stuff happened, and they ranted and raved about how great they were. But overall, most of the judges just were like, were not friendly, and were, operating in such a way where they were just not on the side of Nason, like, throughout the process. And there's a lot that I can say, and I have some notes here, and I hope I can weave this in over time. But yeah, this is just like, where these images are taking me right now, and, a number of these points that I'm trying to make about the church. Again, I don't deny the persecution. It's not cool. But there is, there is some sort of changing relationship between La Luz del Mundo members and local police. Like, for example, here I have two images from two different situations. Here on the left, we have some images, a screenshot. I'll read what it says. It says, members from the Luz del Mundo Church stop by East and North districts to drop off gift bags and say thank you to local officers. They say they appreciated the police, but wanted to put their thoughts into actions. We appreciate them, etc. IMPD News is the name of the page, and I guess this is Indiana. Anyways, it's interesting because, again, church members are not supposed to be, if this is still the rule, are not supposed to be police officers. But yet here is this little favor, or currying a favor to local police officers to bring them gift bags and whatnot. So, fit this how you will, and what you think of La Luz del Mundo, but, something is sort of changing. And it's also kind of cringy, because I just don't see how effective it is, beyond just wasting a couple $100s on the fucking police, which they don't need this bullshit. And then here on the right is a sign of, I guess, some church members and Jack Freeman present. I'm not exactly sure where this is, but here it says, the sign says, "Thank you to all healthcare professionals and first responders worldwide. The La Luz del Mundo Church is praying for you." Okay, that's cute. I get it, but also this stuff was not happening back in the day, right? Or if it was different. But, this stuff wasn't happening so much in the day, and this is, post Nason being arrested. This is them being concerned for their local PR, regional PR, national, international PR. Yeah, this is them being concerned about such a thing. And I put this image here because this comes from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The title is "HBO docuseries shines light on controversial churches' plans in Georgia." This is from December 9th, 2022. So this is a couple days after the HBO documentary comes out. And this was basically the first major documentary that came out. And it was a couple months after Nason pleaded guilty, and was sentenced in June 2022. And so I bring this up because then I'll also think about how La Luz del Mundo has relationships with local government and local city planners and whatnot, and major land sellers and whatnot, in order to start these cities that it wants to start. I constantly think about and want to learn more about the cities that La Luz del Mundo wants to start, literally in Georgia, in El Salvador, which we'll get to a little bit more lately, which they also have LLDM cities in, perhaps in Nicaragua. I would have to check my notes, but in a number of different countries, and then also in a number of different states. This is separate, and I'm not speaking of like ranches for the Joaquin family and other higher ups in the church, but I'm thinking of these certain large land real estate purchases for the purposes of creating LLDM cities, LLDM enclaves, LLDM tourist attractions for other LLDM members that aren't from those countries or anything like that. But they're thinking at local levels and trying to curry favor and gain influence in certain places. And Georgia has been a place where they've been going back and forth. But then certainly after the arrest of Nason, the Flowery Branch site has not been as developed as they would like to at this point, because there's been so much pressure in a lot of other directions. But I find this interesting because La Luz del Mundo certainly wants to have a relationship and its own enclaves, its own corners within different places to create churches, and maybe one could even say isolated communities, self-contained, mostly self-contained, isolated, self-sustaining, to whatever extent. They're trying to create these pockets of communities, and we should all be suspicious of it. And it's very interesting, and it is the tables have turned in a number of ways for the past number of years, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with these places. Here with this slide, another idea that I want to tap into with regard to La Luz del Mundo members thinking or having this idea that the system is corrupt. I want to know what more they think of this with regard to the fact that Joaquin Garcia, had different sets of lawyers throughout his judicial process, from the time of his arrest and up to his sentencing, and even into the present day. In the present day, I can't remember, and I couldn't find it in my notes, but in the present day, there is a person that is officially listed as his legal counsel, and this person is listed in like prison records and incarceration records. I would have to, if someone can clarify this for me, I would appreciate it. But I lost track of this particular point. But there's a church member who is maybe in California, who is an attorney of somehow, and this person is listed as the legal counsel for Nason currently. I still think Alan Jackson is representing Nason in or Nason is I'm sure he's gonna get something more serious, some more serious representation for the federal case that is open on him, that has been open on him and announced since October 2023. But right now there's a church member that is listed or somehow associated or marked as being the official representative of Nason right now. But anyways, taking a couple steps back from the time of his arrest, and this is something that I often forget to say, and I want to be more particular and very punctual about. When Nason was first arrested, and there was the first initial bail hearing, there was no Alan Jackson, there was no Alan Sawyer, there was no Ken Rosenfeld. Rather, the very first initial attorneys that were representing Nason. Again, look here off to the left, he is wearing his cute little white shirt, and he's not wearing an orange jumpsuit, a blue jumpsuit, whatever jumpsuit he was wearing. Very early on, his initial representatives were an attorney called Dmitry Gorin. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Dmitry Gorin, and then there was this. There were some other people, but basically there was a certain person and a little group that was representing him at the first initial bail hearings, to try to try to lower the bail hearings from the millions that they were in, and it didn't work, and they made arguments of, I hope this isn't too sensitive to say, but I think it's important. But the very initial arguments that were coming out of these people in order to get Nason a reduced sentence or reduced measures around him, the arguments were that the people that were abused were not very, very young, that they were only in their teenagers maybe. They also argued about how weapons were not used to force people to do anything, rather so that should be a reason for giving him wiggle room there. And there were other things like that, and then, well, like a handful of days later, they were gone. So, and then they were replaced, or at least upgraded, or they passed the baton of Nason's case on to Alan Sawyer and Ken Rosenfeld, which represented Nason from still early June, not the very first days, but let's say like a week into the arrest. They were representing him and not the other co-defendants that were arrested. So Alondra Ocampo, Susana Medina Oaxaca, they were not representing them. Insofar as it's important to talk about right now. But and then there was also Azaela Rangel Melendez. She was AWOL. She was missing. And from here, I want to say that the baton was passed to them, and they were present. I've had to remember this from that sort of first week of the arrest to then to like mid-August was when they were associated and on the front lines and representing Nason for just about those 2 months. And they are different from every church member in that, you know, they're Gentiles, and all these people have been Gentiles here, and they were never part of the church, and they're not necessarily interested in fucking doctrine and all this other bullshit around it, and these beliefs about this guy. They're just there trying to defend the guy because he has, you know, again, he just has the money to hire these people. Ken Rosenfeld and Alan Sawyer, they are particular in that they would do press conferences and other sort of PR and other sort of services for La Luz del Mundo, beyond just representing them in the courtroom, and beyond just representing Nason in the courtroom. They were also giving press conferences, and they would do interviews and whatnot. And people subsequent to that, like Alan Jackson and Caleb Mason, they were not doing that. Them from August 2019 and on through the conviction, and, you know, just, you know, for a number of years, they were not doing press conferences. And, you know, now at some point it was, you know, COVID had kicked in, and, you know, those sorts of gatherings perhaps, you know, couldn't happen so easily, but still there was Zoom and whatnot. And anyways, these people were never, you know, Alan Jackson never gave an interview or a press release or anything like that to church members, if I'm correct. Like, this person was never doing anything like that. He was just solely representing Nason because Nason had the money, and he could probably wiggle him out of this tight situation. But here I'm just speaking to this lineage of church members, of non-church members that have represented Nason through, and that have taken on different roles for the guy throughout the process. And again, none of these people were church members, and church members had some sort of familiarity with these people. And another point that I will make is that upon the time that Nason was arrested, there was this phenomena or collective action between members to write positive letters about Nason, about when they met him, and like to speak about his character and whatnot. And these things, if I'm being correct, these things were being collected, and I think this was all being funneled or maybe solicited or was intended to be useful to Alan Sawyer and Kenneth Rosenfeld, the people at the bottom. So, you know, there was that going on back then, and they were also giving press conferences and whatnot. And you know, I wonder if those letters, if those whatever that shit was, you know, was of any use to, or if Alan Jackson even cared about it. There's a different relationship that these people have had with members, is my point. Okay, so moving on, I want to discuss, again, I want to point back how church members were, even though I'm sure there's some cohort of church members that are lawyers, that are either lawyers with some sort of financial interest, or lawyers with regard to buildings and infrastructure, civil engineering, those sorts of interests and fields and whatnot. But I think so much about how church members themselves were not involved in this process of representing Nason, which, you know, if anyone is qualified and could be passionate enough and whatever else could be that could do it, it would be a church member, right? But yet there were no church members that represented them. And perhaps they had some sort of contact or relationship to the actual defense team, but from my understanding, and the way I imagine it, is this is just a case where the lawyers within LLDM were just more working towards PR and trying to clean up the image of the church. But anyways, you know, here on the left you have Bibiana Ochoa, who is some sort of lawyer from Utah, who around that time of the arrest gave like interviews and some bullshit about Nason and the church, but nothing was, you know, it wasn't really of any substance. I don't know what has happened to this person, but one thing I do want to say is that I need help finding something. On July 4th or the 3rd, I think it was July 4th, 2019. So within a month of Nason being arrested, there were there was the two lawyers, Kenneth Rosenfeld and Alan Sawyer, here pictured on the right. These two gave a interview from the corridor, the lobby of a church, and I think it was the East Los Angeles church, or a church in California. But there was a church that they were present in, sitting down, not within the actual church, but in the lobby, and they gave an interview, a sit down interview with Viviana Ochoa that was around 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so. I heard it, and I remember hearing it more than one time. And it was up for a year, maybe 2 years. It was up for several years. But anyways, that video was gone now. I cannot find it as easily as I could have. This thing was uploaded on YouTube, and again, it came out on 4th of July 2019. If you happen to have a rip of this video that you could share with me, I would really appreciate you sharing it with me. But I hope I'm not incorrect or mistaken in that. Well, actually, I'm not, but I really want to make sure that video is out there. I do want to see it, but it is interesting. If that video has been taken down, then it has been taken down. And again, if memory serves me correctly, it wasn't even taken down in the time that Jackson was still representing Nason, before his conviction and his sentencing, before his plea deal. That video was still up, and and those guys were not representing Nason at the time. So again, the PR that the LLDM has had to take on back then, and since, has really changed. Some of these people are gone, and some of these people are not involved in the process, but they played some sort of role. They maybe continue to play a role now, and but overall, the changing face of the institution, of the organization, is so strange, and it's shifting now. And then here also again on this image on the right, with regard to the two individuals on the right, I think the people that are pictured here are Adoraim Joaquin and one of Nason's daughters, and they were present at things like this, at the fucking press conferences that were going on in that summer of 2019, and they weren't happening later. And we really don't know where these people were later on in the process, because they stopped showing up to court hearings, and they were not at some of the most important ones. And we don't know where these people are. Like they have also had a changing relationship, and have been behind closed doors with regard to what strategies to take to help the church's image and whatnot. I hope all this makes sense to you all. Let me take a moment to make sure I don't miss anything with what I've shown so far, and before I move on, because we're going to shift gears. I want to say that the Jane Does themselves, and the victims, other sort of victims and figures within the criminal case, like for example, Alondra Ocampo or Xochitl Martin, these people have described how there is, have talked about how they've had to deal with that idea that they should not bring sadness to the leader, that they should not cross him, that there is such a thing as bringing distractions to him, or like viewing him in the wrong way and trying to tarnish his image, that is such a sensitive thing to do. They've talked about how they've had to struggle with that, and it's it's tragic that it was a dynamic. So members can't be police. They can't have guns. They aren't supposed to be taking drugs recreationally. There is some sort of idea of a collective group identity, group reputation that people are trying to maintain, that are people trying to take care of at the local level, at the national level, etc. And this has been something of concern for La Luz del Mundo for going decades back. Yeah. Let me continue to go through this. So right now, Javier Becerra is serving in Biden's cabinet, and could potentially serve in Kamala Harris's cabinet if she happens to win the election later this year. But another thing to note about California politics and these prosecutors that were overseeing these things, the person that preceded Javier Becerra in his office as Attorney General of California was Kamala Harris. And at the time of the reportings of the Jane Does, those things happened in 2018, to my knowledge, and Kamala had left that office by 2017 to, I think by that point she was going to become senator of California. But I'm not saying that she was ever involved or knew or saw the early happenings of a case or anything like that against La Luz del Mundo, but you know, there are these coincidences or ties that can be looked at, that can be noticed. Again, you know, we don't know if she was involved in anything or what she'll be involved in the future. Obviously not, but I just think it's interesting that she was occupying that office before Javier Becerra came in. And then Javier Becerra, once he started in Biden's cabinet in 2021 early, um, after him, Rob Bonta is the person who has become the Attorney General of California. So again, let me know if you can find that 4th of July 2019 interview with Ken Rosenfeld and Alan Sawyer, because they never speak about ever believing in the fucking doctrine around Nason and you know, believing that he's magical and whatnot and that he can talk to God. They more so speak of him as recognizing him, that he is an admirable figure of being a person who is of importance to that church community and whatnot. And so they speak of him in those ways, and they speak about how they are determined to represent him and protect him and whatnot. But again, like within a month, you know, a little over a month after that interview, in early July 2019, they were out of the picture. They were out of the picture, and Alan Jackson and other and company, they became the representatives for Nason. And let me remind you that there is the suspicion, or at least the coincidence, that Ken Rosenfeld and Alan Sawyer were taken out of the picture, were taken out of the process, because in August 2019, that was when those lawyers filed a document with the court saying that that Nason did have some sort of sexual relationship or action with a certain person, but that it was consensual. And so you know, within their writing, they implied that Nason had adultered, and basically from that, you know, there was a certain rupture within the judicial process, because within that document, the people representing Nason at the time, Ken Rosenfeld and Alan Sawyer, they were saying that Nason was an adulterer, and they were conceding that within these arguments that they were filing, and yet it was troubling, because it either meant that Nason was just not aware of what they were saying, or did it mean that he was intentionally letting them to lie about him, or that the guy was just the guy was not being as forceful and as clear and as determined as he could be, because you know, he's the apparent church leader and the apostle and whatnot. But you know, it was just such a strange moment. So that's why I bring that up. This slide and these other slides that I have here are going to be, I want to discuss about how other ways that the apparent authorities or whatever body or institution outside of La Luz del Mundo, how is it that La Luz del Mundo can think that church, that these other places are, that these other institutions and authorities are corrupt? Because you know, let's think, the church has had a culture or some sort of tradition or idea of praying for local authorities. There has been this practice that is sort of occasional, and you know, can often come from the apostles themselves during certain you know, events, maybe, let's say, where they would say that that church members should pray for local authorities, because you know, the authorities, the president, the whoever else, are people that are put into power by God, and that God is pulling all the strings ultimately, and he puts people in different positions for a reason or whatever else. There is that idea, and there has been that practice. And so, you know, is it that practice took place within the framework of looking down on those authorities as like, as those people can just be tools of God sometimes? Or is it like you know, we're praying for these authorities because they don't even know it, but you know, they actually need us, and that they actually admire us the most because we model good citizenship. And there is also that angle of La Luz del Mundo, where church members are encouraged and are framed as being the kind of people that are very good citizens, that they are not troublemakers. You know, like for example, in Hermosa Provincia, they don't have cigarettes being sold at certain stores. or they don't have alcohol being served or anything like that. All that is very interesting to think about, because La Luz del Mundo has some sort of strange relationship with nationalism that, that they can base on the Bible, and they think of with regard to, the Israelites and the Bible, and how they see themselves as the new Israelites who are in need of some sort of home or whatever, like else with regard to like a national home or like anything like that. But they um they certainly emphasize and try to sell themselves as the kinds of people that are going to serve as that are going to be good citizens, that are going to be going to influence, that are not going to be troublemakers, et cetera, et cetera. And that, ties into and weaves in with the idea of hey, don't report certain things to the authorities when there is a certain dispute or situation between different members at a church, because this could bring bad attention to the church, bad attention to the apostle, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope all that makes sense. And I'm not saying this as clearly as I like, but there's this like weird, to wrap up and move on, there's this weird nationalist attitude that La Luz del Mundo has. And it sort of sees itself as like trying to create or live or tread a path for its religious nationalism. There is the idea of certain systems being corrupt or whatever else by humankind back then and then in the present day. But then, La Luz del Mundo is adhering to certain systems, such as that of accepting certain authorities and trying to frame themselves as good citizens, as trying to frame themselves as like people that are worthy of having their votes courted. So they adhere to some systems. They sort of scoff at and squint at other ones, and ask for like what ends, for what ends does that happen? What does it mean when the church tries to like buy these different territories and these different cities and try to establish itself in different enclaves of the world? It's not just that La Luz del Mundo in the 1950s got to start establishing the Hermosa Provincia as a neighborhood, in the east of Guadalajara, and then it was eventually incorporated and grown into. But what does it mean that La Luz del Mundo got that back in the day, and that it's trying to do that again? And not just in the case of Samuel Joaquin and then his family, since his time, trying to own ranches in Texas and California, et cetera, in Mexico, et cetera, in other countries, but also trying to establish, again, full-on cities, full-on like tourist destinations. Does that make sense? Well, I'm thinking about this, and I wonder what they can mean and what could happen there, and whether they will happen, because it's happening in a number of different directions, and that money comes from somewhere, and we'll get to that later on. But here in these next slides, I want to talk about how certain authorities at a state, a regional, a local, national, et cetera, level have given honors to the leaders of La Luz del Mundo, or to La Luz del Mundo itself, as headed by a particular person. And how do they feel about the system being corrupt if they're being given these sorts of awards, if they're having this sort of closeness to the authorities? So here we have an award that I found online. That was the Ayuntamiento Constitucional de Progreso Yucatán, 2001 and 2004. They give some recognition to Samuel Joaquin for his support during a hurricane in a certain municipality. Let's move on. It's not very interesting, but again, I'm pointing at how La Luz del Mundo has had some sort of closeness to different authorities, or has accepted awards, or has given awards, has tried to position itself as a positive influence on different communities at the national level and different local levels, at a state level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then also think about how Samuel Joaquin and other higher ups have overseen and been involved in the construction of like a university in Guadalajara, of hospitals here, of other sorts of public works. And how one could see that selfishly, these are just sorts of PR stunts, or like institutions that are set up to run a profit or to launder and take care of the church's reputation, or whatever that means. Here on the left, we have an image, a screenshot of a video from 10 years ago, where on the 9th of June, that the title is Wisconsin declares 9th of June as the day of Samuel Joaquin Flores. So there's some city in Wisconsin, or maybe the state itself. I think it was just a city. Well, actually, yeah, City Hall, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They declared the 9th of June as the day of Samuel Joaquin Flores. And, how often was Samuel in Wisconsin? Who fucking knows? He probably was there, but for sure, and it has to be the case that local members, local leaders there were trying to curry favor with the government in order to have this happen, by saying that Samuel was probably given a whole bunch of scholarships around the church, or he was helping with the construction of churches, or like he helped with like a natural disaster that happened around there, whatever it is, whatever the hell it is. Oh, just okay, it happened. But anyways, the funniest part before we move on from this image is that Flores is misspelled in the cryon in the caption that is provided in this image, Folres, but whatever. And that cryon was by Berea Vision themselves, so their copywriting is not as good as it can be, as it should be. Here on the right is an image of Samuel Joaquin Flores, I guess, giving some sort of his foundation, I guess, giving awards to whoever. I don't care what context this is in. This is clearly not a religious apostle thing. This is just a launder his reputation, look important, make other people feel important for whatever reason. I don't know what this is, but one is justified in looking at this cynically in context with all the other images. One is justified in looking at this cynically to see it as just like pyrotechnics in theater, of making this person seem more important than they actually are. They're not important, and who cares about all this stuff? What was the system corrupt back then, and what would it mean to say back then that the system was corrupt? Here's some more images of Samuel related time. So here is an image of I think this is Aristoteles Sandoval, if that's his name, if I remember that correctly. This guy ended up being assassinated like 3 years ago. But anyways, he was here's some award being presented to Uciel Joaquin that says El Gobierno del Estado de Jalisco, the state of Jalisco, gives a recognition to Samuel Joaquin Flores. And here is Uciel accepting it. And here on the right is another image of, I guess, some sort of local government or state or something presenting an award or a certificate to Samuel Joaquin for whatever fucking reason. But anyways, clearly this is not a certificate because the guy demonstrated his magic powers actually, or because he actually raised people from the dead or anything like that. These are just political, visual, PR, aesthetic things that the higher ups within the church have embraced, have tried to curry, have tried to bring into being in order to help the church have some sort of standing collectively, but then also as an institution, as it tries to buy lands in different places to build different cities. I hope all this makes sense, and I hope all this is all weaving together. But what does it mean to say that the system is corrupt? Here and there. And I'm not saying that none of these politicians are corrupt or nothing like that. I totally recognize that, but I totally recognize that Luz del Mundo has to operate within whatever context it is in, but still, like, these are very cheap aesthetic ploys to clean its image and to seem more important than they are now. Because what does all this mean now in the present day? Like, are you guys still getting these awards? Is there still awards being shipped off to Nason? And we'll get to him in a bit, but is that still happening? Have you guys reached 6 million members? Like, what does any of this count for now? Besides just looking bad for the church as an institution. Here on the left is another image of Benjamin Joaquin receiving an award from the Ayuntamiento de Guadalajara for 50. It's for Samuel Joaquin Flores, and the quote is for his 50th anniversary of social work and altruism, whatever the fuck that means, right? Whatever the fuck that meant now, it kind of means fucking nothing now in the present day. Here on the right, we have another image of a certificate of recognition for La Luz del Mundo Church in the Buena Vista Aquatic Recreation Area. Quote, in honor of the annual birthday of Samuel Joaquin Flores, International Director of blah, blah, blah church, for exemplary public service and civic contributions to the community and Kern County. This is 2002, March 16th. This is some local place. I guess this is in California, maybe. But I don't, who cares? What does this mean? The guy was, the guy was probably there. And, did he give a donation? I don't know what it means, but, right now it kind of means nothing. It kind of stands for nothing. And it can be looked at very cynically because all this stuff that the church has acquired, that leaders have happened and staged and whatnot, this is all being publicized to church members in order to keep them feeling like they're special, like they're part of something special, like they could aspire to be this, and that they are being recognized by the greater world around them. You're fucking not, because the exact opposite has actually taken place. The tables have completely flipped, and none of this stuff is happening anymore, is it? Like I don't know if this kind of stuff is happening anymore. But if you were fed this stuff at any point, look back on it differently is the point of that I'm trying to make in this video. Here on the left, I have an image that reads Patriarca Iberoamericano de la Educación a Samuel Joaquin Flores. Some sort of recognition extended to Samuel Joaquin Flores for some sort of educational endeavors. I don't know when this year is exactly, but on the image on the right says 2007. The image on the left here says 2008. It's quite blurry, but these come from somewhere. These mean something. These meant something at some point, and they mean nothing now. Here's an image. Here's a screenshot of a blog called Las Grandes Biografías, so Grand Biographies. It's on WordPress, and I'm gonna read it for a bit. The title or the subheading here is "The Religious Leader of the 20th Century," Epoca magazine. And I translated this, by the way, like through the browser. So if there's something wrong with it, don't exactly pin it on whoever wrote this. Quote, in 2000, as the most influential leader in the religious sphere, leading the second largest and fastest growing church in the Mexican Republic, he was named most important religious leader of the 20th century. So this is Samuel Joaquin Flores in 2000, being named the most important religious leader of the 20th century in the year 2000. So it continues. In the survey conducted by Epoca magazine in its number 448 of January 3rd of that year, within the catalog of leaders of the 20th century. Journalist Elisa Robledo writes about this. Brother Samuel Joaquin Flores is the international director of the Church of the Living God and pillar and supporter of the truth, the light of the world. After just over 7 decades of evangelizing work, the church has general membership of approximately 5 million members worldwide, 1.5 million in Mexico, distributed across 28 countries on 5 continents, making it the most widespread non-Catholic institution with a Mexican influence in the 20th century. Okay, so that was a lot. And number one can go to how this journalist, Elisa Robledo, is talking about the church. And number one, it's funny that she says that at that point in 2000, that Samuel had fucking seven decades of evangelizing work. Well, actually, no, she's saying the church has had over 7 decades of evangelizing work. That is true. I actually thought when I read that, I thought she was talking about Samuel Joaquin at that point, and that she was talking about him in like his last decade of life, and describing him as if he had been preaching and doing evangelizing work since he was a child, since he was under 10, but I misread that. But anyways, the important point is that here in 2000, this person, Elisa Robledo, is writing that the church has a general membership of approximately 5 million members around the world. That's in fucking 2000. And again, like I have really hammered home, the church was really hammering in 2019, in June 2019, that they had 5 million members around the world. And that's not true. That's a lie. And it's been 5 years since that, and they have not given an update on that. They've said that they've grown and then whatnot, that 99.9% of the members have actually been retained and whatnot. But like, who's actually counting here, because the church isn't actually counting, and Elisa Robledo isn't actually counting. Because, again, back then, Elisa Robledo says 1.5 million members are in Mexico. That's not true. The census in 2021 that came out from Mexico from INEGI, and I say this all the time, they counted under 200,000 LLDM church members within Mexico. And a quarter of those were people that were under 18. So they're children. So they're like, brought into the church kind of, by force, just by association. But Elisa Robledo here is talking in 2000, and she's saying that back then there was the 5 million member claim, which, again, at that point was already almost a decade old. That claim was almost a decade old. So they're already wrong, and they've always been wrong. But keep all these numbers in mind, because it's just so confusing and frustrating to see how far this lie goes back, and how members are just not asking for any straight numbers kind of at any point. Like, well, what do numbers mean? Because the spokespeople will just tell you that there's 99.9% of people staying in the church, and that is that actually technical? Is that like technical, like Germex hand sanitizer is technically killing 99.9% of germs on your hands? Or is it a rhetorical thing? It has to be rhetorical. It can't be actually technical and like substantiated and counted on fingers and tallied up. But anyways, this next figure that, in 2000, Elisa Robledo is saying that the church is present in 28 countries on 5 continents. The church, I don't know, people can count continents in different ways. I don't know what they mean by 5 continents, but in 2000, I'm not going to dispute that, I'm not very interested or inclined to dispute that the church is present in 28 countries. But think about this, because this is 2000 that we're talking about. And sure, let's accept that the church is present in 28 countries and that they're saying that they have 5 million members worldwide. Later in 2019, when Nason is arrested, they're saying that the church is present in over 50 countries around the world. I kind of just accept that figure too. I wonder what all those countries are. I haven't exactly counted them all, but what's important to recognize is that number will change, of how many countries LLDM is present in. That will change, and I'm sure that is technically true. But the other figure is very dubiously technically true. It is very dubious that thing is true. I don't think La Luz del Mundo has ever reached more than 5 million members, and I certainly do believe, or will accept that they're present in however many countries at 2000, at 2019, in the present day in 2024. I think now in 2024, the number that people are going with is that they're present in over 60-ish countries or whatever else. But whatever those countries are, I'm sure that's probably true. But again, I would warn La Luz del Mundo to fucking hold its horses when saying that the church is present in whatever country, because you can just say that you're present in this country, in that country, in the Philippines, for example, but you can't say that you have conquered it. There's probably church members that are going to be sent to South Korea at some point. If they haven't been sent there already, mark my words, they might be sent there sometime soon. And we better not hear from the church that they have conquered that country, because they most certainly would have not, and probably will never, ever. They haven't conquered any country that they have been present in at all. So, they can be technically present in whatever countries that they can be and want to be in, but that 5 million member claim is decades old at this point, and is not going to go up. And when it does go up, is everyone just going to swallow the big pill? I don't know. But then also, there's already been the claims, floating that the church membership worldwide is like 6 million, 7 million, 8 million. I've heard those come from different places, but that's not exactly the mainstream claim. But so be it. Anyways, again, this is the last thing this is the last point I'll make here. But this is 2000 that we're talking about. In 2019, Silem Garcia Peña would say in press conferences that the church has 1.8 million members in Mexico. I'm pretty sure he said that. I'm pretty sure this person said 1.8 million, and I'm pretty sure that was in 2019. I would have to double check my notes, but a person like that has said that back then in 2019, and they were fucking wrong, because that is 9 times the amount of what Iñegi counts. And, they can be wrong to whatever extent, but the margin of error can't be that gigantic. Someone is fucking lying here. And it's more likely that the church is lying rather than Iñegi, the Mexican census. And, refer back to the very first video I did on this channel. I have broken down how of the claims of how many members there are in Mexico, because it's certainly not 1.5 million. So Silem Garcia Peña in 2019 was saying that it was 1.8 million members in Mexico. That's not true. That would be, I think it was around like 2% of the population of Mexico. But anyways, La Luz del Mundo is not even 1% of the population of Mexico ever at any point in actuality. So yeah. And here's another thing. In the summer of 2019, Sara Pozos also gave an interview on Mexican national television with, I forget who. I have the clip. I've posted it on this channel before. You can refer back to very early videos on this and to a number of other videos. But in that interview, at that point in summer 2019, Sara Pozos would say that the number of members in Mexico is 1.5. And so, that's in sharp contrast to this claim being peddled in 2000. In 2019, that's basically 2 decades later. And is it like the church has just not grown since then? Like, the church, I'm willing to accept, is technically present in more countries, but they've certainly not conquered a single one of them. And they have certainly not grown since more than 5 million since the decades going back that this claim has been floating around. This claim is not true. This claim is not true, and there's so many reasons for it to be dubious. To read the last paragraph, I'll go ahead and read it. He defines himself as, quote, a preacher who focuses on activity on the spread of Christian gospel. I understand and practice honesty and as a basic responsibility of my pastoral administration. At the head of this religious association, La Luz del Mundo, the light of the world, I have dedicated myself to propagating Christian and national values as well as the right to life, liberty. Consequently, the hundreds of thousands of people that have accepted this doctrine enjoy stability and immutable improvement in their standard of living, which has translated into concrete benefits for themselves, for their family, for their community, where they lived, and for the country where they reside. Okay, so think about that, and think about how the number of directions that Samuel Joaquin is apparently pointing to with regard to nationalism, that he's cognizant and he is aware of the church being present in different nations, and the church has to have different relationships with different nations and their presence of their church members there, and their concern for religious freedom and whatnot in all these nations. So but then also, why is Samuel Joaquin here being quoted as saying that consequently the hundreds of thousands of people that have accepted this doctrine, is it not fucking millions at this point? Is it not supposedly millions at this point in 2000? That this is a wrong quote if it's technically wrong, or like if it was misquoted, but like this is the shoelaces are tied here, and they're just tripping over themselves. It kind of just like at every turn. Moving on, shifting gears to Nathan Joaquin. He came into the power. He came into power in late 2014. After Samuel had passed away. And here is an image of Nathan receiving a recognition from the state of Guerrero in 2015, 2016. Whenever this image is, I just kind of pulled this off the internet. I didn't exactly try to create a timeline, but I just want to show this because this kind of stuff, this kind of awards wasn't happening for Nathan back when he wasn't apostle. But when he does, then he is now being peddled around, shoveled around as the kind of person who is young, who is a new face of the institution, who is trying to be a revitalizing force for the church, to grow it, to send it into more countries. I'm very sure, and I'm willing to accept that the church is present in more countries right now because of his administration, since the time that his administration has started. But the church has not certainly grown more than 5 million, because they're still peddling that. They were still peddling that in 2019. I'm pretty sure they would still try to go on that now, but they're not trying to say that. They're trying to say, this number of countries we're present in, this number of churches we opened this year, this number of churches we opened in this month, or like this most recent figure that I was talking about, where they're saying that the church has retained like 99.9% of believers that continue to believe. Whatever. You just that I just can't stand these kinds of images. Here's some more images of Nason receiving awards. I'm not gonna get into much of this, but again, these are just different awards from, say, like a local city, maybe a local educational institution, maybe a local state government, a small state government in Mexico, giving an award here, there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Wherever it is that it happens, what does it mean now? Is it, this shit isn't still going on, but like, because the relationship that churches have now at the local, regional, national level is all different. But what did this mean back then, and what does it mean now? Nicolas Menchaca is on the far left in this far left image here, and Silem Garcia Peña is in the back of this image up on top. And the church wasn't under the eyes of the law back then, in the way that it is now. But what does this kind of stuff mean now? It served a purpose back then, and it was fed to members to make them feel special and whatnot. But again, I just there was too much of this going on, and we really should have thought about this way more critically when it was going on. One last thing I'll say is that on the image to the left, there is this logo here at the bottom that says 3 years. I guess this is 3 years from Nason being in charge of the church, so like 2018, 2017. What can say that's around that time before he was arrested. Moving on, I have way more many slides, and we're probably only a little over halfway. But here in these images, I'm going to talk about El Salvador and its present president, Nayib Bukele, who I guess has been in power since before 2019, or maybe that same year. He's still the president right now, but he has been president in the past. And anyways, like right before Nason was arrested, a month before he was arrested in California in June 2019, this guy was in fucking El Salvador laying the first stone or helping inaugurate or familiarize himself with the church territory there that they were trying to build, a local LLDM city. And these are images that I've pulled from Berea's own site. You can find, they have Berea, and other church iconography and logos are present on these images, and you can find this on their own site. And so, they're not posting, stuff of Nason now in the present day. There's no updated selfies of what he looks like now, but his portraits were certainly being peddled a lot back then, and this kind of stuff was being celebrated left and right. And so, the question was like, well, what system was corrupt back then? You guys are trying to curry favor and influence and power, et cetera, and all these different places. And I don't know. Are you trying to change things from the inside? I don't know what any of that means. I don't know what any of this means. Here's another image that I guess I pulled off very quickly from Google that comes from LLDM.org, and the caption says, the title is #WeAreLight, and then there's a caption within this image that says, autoridades de los tres niveles del gobierno acudieron hoy a la colonia Hermosa Provincia, sede internacional de la Iglesia del Dios Vivo, okay, para reconocer la figura del director nacional Nason Joaquín García. So I guess this was in 2016, 15, 17, 18, whenever. But off to the left, we have Aristoteles present, and he's the guy who's been assassinated a number of years back, but he had some sort of relationship to the church. I think I said his name earlier, and I may have been mistaken in identifying this person, but in this image, he is present here. And what was the system corrupt back then? Like, if anything, the system in Guadalajara is corrupt, but to the tragic point where back in the 90s, Samuel Joaquin should have really been prosecuted or tried or investigated, or something much more serious than what we know now happened back then. Something much more serious should have happened back then with regard to the allegations that were brought to him back in 1997. So the system is corrupt in that way. I'm willing to accept that. And it is tragic that it took Nason, taking advantage of his power in 2019 to get arrested. It is tragic that something could have happened 2 decades prior to the church to hurt its membership, rightfully so, or to investigate it, etc. But at this point, the church probably wouldn't say that the system is corrupt. The system isn't corrupt when it is trying to curry favor with the church, when the church has influence, when it is engaging with the authorities in this context. It doesn't want to engage in other contexts. And I wish, people like that have left the church would wish that that authorities in Mexico had, gone after the church much more seriously at different points back in the past. But another thing I'll say is that there is this report from Isaías Alvarado. I've been reminded of it. If you really want this and you can't find it yourself, let me know. If not, I can find it for you. But there had been a report rather recently from Isaías Alvarado from Univision detailing how he found out that the FBI in the United States was interested in investigating Samuel Joaquin back in the 90s or back in the 2000s. I'm not too sure exactly when, but certainly way more, a long time ago. And they didn't go forward with anything, but they had their eye, or they had some sort of file on Samuel, and nothing happened back then. And you know what? The system was corrupt back then for not, if not corrupt, then it was feeble for not going after the church in whatever justified way it could have. But yeah, I'm willing to say that the system is corrupt in certain ways, but then also it's also not. And I get more mixed messaging from the church than anything else, is what I'm trying to say. Here's some more images of Samuel receiving awards from wherever, and here you have the Casa Cultural Berea logo and insignia on these images. And this is stuff that they were publicizing to members back in the late 2010s, before Nathan was arrested. They were showing the shit left and right. But yet, what does it mean now? Where are all these people, if they really cared anything about the church, to defend this guy and his altruism and his support for education and public safety and good citizenship, whatever all that stuff means back then, it doesn't really mean much now. And it means something differently now. Here's another image from, titled, this is just a headline. En Juárez, reconoció Pérez Collar a Nación Joaquín por labor social. In the city of Juárez in Mexico, across the border from El Paso, Texas, there was a recognition from Pérez Collar for Nathan Joaquin for his social work. And this is from 8th of June 2019. And like this is right after the fucking arrest, but this award was apparently still given, or at least this is the date of the report. But the guy was arrested by this point, and how much time did he spend in Juarez? How much actual social work was he doing? Is this his reputation just being laundered through local members, through local regional interests, through local APM chapters, or not AP, APM, like I'm thinking of in Guadalajara, Asociación de Profesionales and whatever else. Or here in this context, one can think of APS, of Association of Professionals and Students, which is that's a name sort of given in the United States. And this is in Juarez, but anyways, whatever local chapter of APM or APS is present in Juarez that was laundering Nathan's reputation for this fucking award, like all that, there's strings being pulled, and I'm just suspicious of this person actually doing a lot of social work in this place in 2018, before he got this award. What do you know? Whatever this means, it means something differently now. Here's another screenshot of, from January 30th, 2017. And this is titled, and this is from Berea's own site. Nombran al apóstol Nason Joaquín Puente para unir a las Américas. This is in Panama, and there's just some sort of government figure there gave Nathan an award for being the kind of person that can unite the Americas across regional, national boundaries and all that stuff. Whatever that means, I don't know what this means then. This meant something back then. This doesn't mean anything now. This doesn't mean anything now. It means something differently. Here's another one with, again, Nayib Bukele, and this is in October 14th, 2015. This is from Berea's own site. Entregan un reconocimiento al apóstol de Jesucristo, Nason Joaquín García. This is some sort of award from Nayib Bukele giving Nathan some award in El Salvador, and it means whatever it means whatever it meant back then, and kind of means nothing now. At this point in 2015, Nayib Bukele, it says here that he was the alcalde de San Salvador, so he's just a mayor. He's just a certain local level leader. He's not yet the president of El Salvador, but Nathan has a relationship with this person prior to this person becoming the president, and then and then this person becomes a president, and then he's president. He's trying to help Nason with, starting his LLDM city in El Salvador. So, there's just this relationship that they still have. But anyways, here's another one where también Tepic declara visitante distinguido al apóstol de Jesús. Nelson Joaquin, this is from November 2017, and this is Nason being given some award from Tepic in Mexico for recognition of whatever else. And this means whatever it means. But here's another one off to the right from 2017. I don't think it's the same ceremony, but on the left of this image, clapping for Nason's receivement of an award of recognition. There was Salem Garcia Peña just clapping for him. He's just very close to the apostle, but yeah, his little buddy's gone now. Here's an image of some that I pulled out the internet. There are some politicians that I guess belong to, or at least are identified as being couriers of favor, of power within the Mexican government for the purposes of benefiting La Luz del Mundo. And their names are escaping me off the top of my head, but I do have them written down. And again, what does it mean to say when the system is corrupt, when you have these politicians still operating within the system that curry favor to whatever extent to the church? And maybe they do understand the systems is corrupt. The systems are corrupt, but it is still necessary to operate within them. But none of these people, or none of these other professional lawyers or dedicated, educated church members were defending Nason during his criminal case. It was other people that were not part of the church. And so, questions are being asked here. Questions are being asked in response to this question of, what does it mean to when LLDM says that the system is corrupt? What system, at what level, in what ways? Why wasn't it in these ways, in these contexts, when you guys were receiving awards and currying favor with different governments left and right? Here's some more local images that I can attest to. On the bottom left, we have Sheila Jackson Lee, who recently passed away, who was a Congress person from Texas, from Houston, Texas. I personally saw Sheila Jackson Lee speak at a LLDM student recognition event back in the late 2010s. And she just gave a speech, and maybe she spoke to some people, but she wasn't around for the entire thing. For all the speakers, she wasn't around for any of that. But she did speak at one point, and I guess she was invited to speak. And so here, one can say that this is an instance where they're trying to curry favor or familiarity with the church in Houston, church members in Texas, and this important politician, this Democrat, let's say. And then also on the right here is a person called Adrian Garcia, who is a sheriff, who was a local politician in Houston that I'm not too sure what they are right now, but at some point they were a sheriff or a police department, and they were, I guess, running for a different office, and then maybe for mayor at some point. But anyways, different offices at different points. This person was a police officer. And here on this image on the top left is some police officers speaking to church members in Houston in the Canal location. Houston has like 7 or a certain number of different locations within the greater Houston area, and Canal Street is one of them. There's one on Canal Street, and then there is the one that is considered the central one, which is in North Houston. But anyways, here's an instance where at a with an apparent APS banner, there is these police officers that are here talking to church members about whatever it is. It could be that they're trying to talk to church members about Adrian Garcia or whatever political shit is going on around town. But Adrian Garcia is not in this image. There's church members here. There is some sort of familiarity, some sort of contact between police, local authorities, etc., and the church. But it can't be the case that church members can be police officers, right? And then yet also, this is what's interesting is that these sorts of things also exist in conversation with people, saying that people that church members can't be part of the police, but yet can they be lawyers and politicians and whatnot? Yeah, you can, for the purposes of benefiting the church, because these people aren't members, but they can try to help benefit the church and be familiar with the church and whatnot. But then what would it mean for an LLDM member to be the person who is put in charge of arresting Nason if they are a police officer? the things are nuanced here, and in no way is the nuance ever look good for La Luz del Mundo is what I'm trying to put here. Here on this image on the right, I pulled from Facebook, and I'll read the caption. This is from August 7th, 2018. This is before Nason's arrest. This is like with Nason being in power, and Adrian Garcia is for sure, I know, and I've seen how this person was present at LLDM churches, speaking to people, being involved in the community, let's say, like some sort of politician should be. But anyways, in this caption that Adrian Garcia provides on the church in 2018, this guy's from the Houston, Texas area. So I'll read this. He says, I've just been invited to help build bridges with the Light of the World Church at their annual conference in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. La Luz del Mundo is in 53 countries. This is 2018. They're in 53 countries with more than, quote, 500 million members worldwide and 7 churches in the Houston area, end quote. So, okay, I guess the church is present in 7 places in the greater Houston area, but Adrian Garcia, at least maybe at the very least on his own, has a major typo here where he says that the church has 500 million people worldwide. That's so fucking stupid. That's so stupid. That is 1 in 14, 1 in 15, 1 in 16, 1 in 17, 1 in 18, 1 in 19, 20, etc. people in the world, right? 500 million, that's 500 million people. Okay, so maybe he's very, very wrong here. That's not true, because this is 100 times over the highest estimates that are provided by church people, church spokes figures, etc. That is 100 times, wrong, off the marker. So if we take off 1 0, it could just be 50 million people worldwide, etc. And okay, that's still very wrong. That's still 10 times off. That's still 10 times more than any church member would actually reckon or even dare to claim that the church has. And so, okay, I guess it's just very funny here that at the very least he has 2 zeros here that are complete typos that are just so wrong, and this is just silly. This is just silly shit. At no point is the church providing really an actual accurate portrayal of itself at any level, at any point. Here's a screenshot from a website called Etcetera, and the title of the article from 5th of June 2019 is Gobernador de Colima Ignacio Peralta, uno de los políticos que arropó a Nason Joaquín. And I guess here's an image of this person, of this local governor of Colima in Mexico, this figure Ignacio Peralta, and I guess he's present at church. Is he holding a Bible? Is that what they're showing here? I'm not sure, but anyways, back, at a local level, even, sometimes people will write about how certain local politicians have ties to the church and how it should not be looked good, in light of certain things. And so I hope this has made sense so far. I'm asking a number of different directions about this stuff and giving some commentary on a number of different angles about this idea that the church thinks the system is corrupt. And I would like some clarification on this from the church. I'm obviously not going to get it, but I put this out there in order to help you guys think through this, a number of things, and to help myself practice talking and practice thinking about these things for an audience. These next set of images that I have is just kind of images that I pulled from the internet that I guess come from welcoming ceremonies for Santa Cenas for the church. And at these Santa Cenas, and this goes back to the question of nationalism. Well, what does nationalism mean for La Luz del Mundo? La Luz del Mundo has started in Mexico and then spread into the United States, spread throughout Mexico, spread into Central South America, and then beyond. I'm willing to accept that, the trajectory and the spread of the church in those ways. But, how is it that, again, none of these countries are conquered. None of these countries are actually conquered or even dominated by any LLDM members at all, right? They're just present in these different places, and those numbers have grown over time. And not that 5 million member claim, has not grown and it's just been alive since it's ever been out. But, what does it mean to start adopting the imagery and the flags of those nations where you're present in and bringing them into Guadalajara and into these ceremonies that are central to the church to welcome people from all over the world, which, that's great, welcome each other and all that stuff. But what does it mean to start to bring in all this imagery, which, vexillologically, which is, to say the study of flags, of flag symbolism and iconography and colors and whatnot. That is interesting all in its own. But what does it mean when this church is just trying to bring in all that shit? And certainly just about everyone in the church can't explain what any of those flags exactly mean. And it's not to say that they have to know what exactly any of those flags mean all the time, but LLDM has its own flags, and it's trying to create its own identity, and it's trying to pull from all directions of all nations where they are present in to create this one collective religious dispersed diasporic nation of LLDM members. In that way they try to frame themselves or picture themselves as like the neo Jewish people, which apparently or supposedly need a country for themselves, or promised a country, a land, etc., from God. They may be dispersed around the world, and that there is something that they should centralize into. In this way, Hermoso Provincia and the head of the church and whatever else that is running these ceremonies, they're trying to funnel a lot of that influence and religious and like nationalist ideals and conceptions. They're trying to funnel all that back into Guadalajara, back into Hermoso Provincia, to make that be some sort of central enclave, the actual headquarters of the church. But then again, they think also to how the church is trying to create central hubs and locations, satellite hermosa provincias in Georgia, in El Salvador, and I guess maybe you can count some ranches that the church has open. But the church has large territories where they're trying to create cities in a number of different countries and a number of different places. I'm trying to count them all, but there's certainly more than one. There's certainly more than three. And think about what those mean in light of this, in light of these ideas that the church is trying to be nationalist in some sort of way, that it is trying to adopt that language and that spirit and whatnot into its future projects. What are you trying to create? Some sort of system from the bottom up that is not going to be corrupt, like all the other systems are corrupt? Are you trying to create some sort of system where there are authorities that are all church authorities, and then you may still be praying for the authorities because God put them there for some reason, and ultimately you just still want God to help rulers, to help authorities, whatever all that shit means. It is I'm very interested in these images of when all these nationalist identities and flags and whatever, and all the histories behind them that involve church members and don't involve church members, like at all, really, and involve more nationalist groupings, to all be brought together and displayed in this way. The central church in Hermosa Provincia can have like a fuck ton of flags inside, just all perched, and maybe people can name some of them. I'm pretty sure no one can name all of them. And if there is someone that can name all of them, I'm pretty sure they can't give the meanings behind all of them. And that's okay. That's not exactly what I want people to have in there. But again, it is just it still means something aesthetically to be doing this, to be consolidating all this stuff and trying to, up your numbers in terms of how many countries you're present in, but not trying to, but because you recognize that you can't try to up your actual numbers of like 5 million members, which again has just been bandied about for decades and it's never been true. And who knows what it stands for now. It's just interesting to have all these flags come in. And so there is another thing I've been interested in, how the church has been present in Israel, and it has some sort of idea of itself as the new Israel. And that's a topic all in its own. And I'm not even sure if I'm exactly prepared to talk about that yet. But there is this idea that the church, thinks of itself as the new Jewish people, and that as they're the new people that are chosen by God, and that it is not all Christians and not all Christian non-Jewish people that are the people of God, but rather it's just solely, La Luz del Mundo. And yet, La Luz del Mundo is present in Israel. They have missionaries over there, I'm pretty sure, like still in the present day, and they have had them there for a while, certainly not since the beginning. And I know for a fact that Samuel his family, other people in the Joaquins, etc., have all traveled to Israel at one point or another for maybe tourist reasons or for the purposes of trying to spread the church. But they're not, certainly they're not doing missionary work, but they have some sort of association with the religious occupation there, that they have at least been tourists to. And so, I certainly wonder what LLDM members' attitudes are towards Palestinian people and towards like the conflict going on over there. I've certainly learned a lot in almost the past year since the situation has reached a certain point. But these people that are in Israel, it's just interesting that the church really identifies with this in a certain way, and yet we have the situation that's going on now. And here I have other images on the right of on the bottom right of again of the U.S. flag and of the Texas flag being presented at like some sort of church gathering. And what is it that these things mean? Like, because I have a PhD in history, and I certainly recognize in which ways I don't agree with and cringe at the trajectory that these nationalist projects have taken. And what does it mean that that La Luz del Mundo embraces them or just sort of brings them in and doesn't even exactly maybe interrogate them? Or what does it mean? Because the leader, the president of this organization, the top person is in jail, and the direction of this church has taken on a different tone. And what does it mean that the system is corrupt? Is the system with all these governments corrupt? Why just bring in their flags into these contexts uncontested, uninterrogated, etc.? What does this mean? I have these questions floating around, and I don't think we can get satisfactory answers from La Luz del Mundo. But no matter what they say, I'm pretty sure it can be revealing with regard to how they would address these things. That's basically what I have all for this video. A number of things that I wanted to talk about that I wasn't going to talk about in this video, but I still want to recognize them, is that within this video, with regard to the question of what does it mean when La Luz del Mundo says that the system is corrupt, at what level and what context, why is that there's relationships in this way and then not in this way, and then how does the certain dynamic, feed into the culture of silence, the culture of not reporting things to the authorities, etc. I wanted to think in those directions, but then also here's the things that I wasn't talking about, and that I wasn't trying to talk about, but I still recognize that someone may have this pop up in their head. But there are spokespeople, not official spokespeople from the church, but there are people like on YouTube, etc., on their own to whatever accord or collaboration with the actual PR end of the church. There have been people who have been bandying about how a particular point in the judicial process was corrupt, or how rights were being violated in one way, or how rights were being violated in another way, or how, for example, people at different points in the trial would say that people aren't given their faces, that evidence has not been presented, etc., where there has been intentional or otherwise confusion from everybody. But from sometimes the confusion that comes from church members is kind of intentional, to the point of trying to confuse other members into actually continuing to support Nason and actually think that the system is corrupt, that the criminal justice system is corrupt, which I'm willing to say and recognize how I don't support policing as it exists in the present day. I don't appreciate fully the systems of incarceration that we have now, and the systems of rehabilitation or lack thereof that we have now for people that are imprisoned, etc. I can talk all day long about criminal justice reform and whatnot, but the La Luz del Mundo people are not exactly interested in that. And instead, they were just, I never heard any of that, because they were just more so interested in scoring points and just saying anything to help Nason feel, to help people feel like Nason was actually being exploited and was not being represented correctly, which again, okay, you guys have all these Gentile lawyers that are there on the front lines, and why don't you have someone who's actually passionate and would care about the reputation of Nason and would not lie for him and would not misrepresents him in a court document, even if it meant benefiting him or whatever else. When it came to like the deep fakes, the conspiracy theory and the talking point of there being deep fakes and that the apostle wasn't caught on any imagery or anything like that. When it comes to that, the church members weren't, the lawyers themselves, Alan Sawyer and Ken Rosenfeld at one point were talking about, oh, there's deep fakes, he's being framed, etc. But Alan Jackson later on would still talk about how he's being framed or it's not true or anything, but he was never talking about how images were actually fake, where this person, such and such person, the Catholic Church here, there, wherever, is trying to take down Nason for these reasons and that he's being framed. They weren't talking in those ways. And so I bring all that up because I want to point out that, sometimes there can be these very technical points that church defenders have brought up, but they are not that, but I'm not fully convinced by them, or I don't actually really care about them too much because they can't flip all these other dynamics and points that are in play. Because within this narrow context of the system being corrupt, the picture has never looked pretty for Nason Joaquin throughout his process. All these judges were not really ruling in favor of him. They were really having their own swings at him too. The Jane Does always had their swings hard and straight from the beginning. And, although the process could be prolonged and Jackson could prolong the process by the amount that he did, ultimately, he was never talking about there being deep fakes or the Catholic Church being involved in pulling strings or anything like that. But rather, instead, the arguments were something else. And certainly there have been points where the criminal justice system process looked positive for Nason. Like, for example, in April 2020, when the initial set of charges was thrown out on a technical matter, and then Nason remained arrested for several days, for like a day or more, but eventually later, like the next day or a couple days later, charges were refiled against Nason, and there were more charges on there than before. So there was that one brief window of time where charges were thrown out for Nason at first, and people were saying and throwing around that, hey, he could be released, that we think we did it. He could they weren't saying he weaseled out of it, but it was looking like that, like, hey, we finally weaseled out of it. And then of course, the fact came right back in their face that things boomeranged right around, where there was more charges put on him, and that he stayed behind bars the entire time. He had never at any point got to post bail. So I'm interested. I've heard these arguments, these very technical things. The picture has generally almost always never looked pretty for the church, for Nason Joaquin. At some points, it may have looked like he was winning, like the defense team was doing something to prolong the process, to delay it, to appeal here, to appeal there, etc. At some points, there were some wins, but really, for the most part, so much percent of the time, things were not looking pretty for them. And judges were saying things that were very forcefully not painting the church in a positive way. So I recognize that. I'm not convinced by those arguments, that by those very technical things. I'm not going to regurgitate them point by point, but there are those things there. I was not discussing those things now because I feel that in the grander context of all these other aspects of the church, one could still wonder and think of, like, well, what does the church mean when it says that the system is corrupt? And like, why should that matter? Because at no point did Nason, again, even himself, Nason was never saying that. He may be saying those things in his letters in a certain way, but it's still like casted in the idea that the church is being persecuted, that this is a test from God, that God is just cleaning the flock and skimming through and taking out the what has been dead and not profitable and not productive to the church, taking out those people. So I recognize that stuff, but I'll probably talk about this in another video. I want to talk about I guess more instances of where I think that sure, the system is corrupt or can be corrupt, but from my own educated perspective, from my own perspective of having kept track of these happenings over time and these dynamics and talking points that have bandied about, I'm not convinced that the system is corrupt. in the way that the La Luz del Mundo people want to think. In fact, I think the system is operating correctly in a certain way, and could have and should have been operating correctly in the past in a different country, in Mexico in the 90s, or maybe even earlier. But anyways, keep that in mind when thinking about the stuff with members, or when you hear this shit from certain people. And like other people have said, if the church so much disagrees with HBO Max, with HBO, if they so much disagree with Netflix, with Hulu has a documentary, VIX, Univision, etc., Televisa, etc., Milenio, etc., all these people all these people and institutions and media companies that have given these terrible castings of the reputation of the church and its doctrine and what happened, etc., and its process through and its behavior throughout the process. Go sue those people. They're not suing these media companies because they know that they're fucking right. And these media companies would not be putting this stuff out there if they didn't know that they had a straight story here. So, think about all this stuff. That is basically all I have to say about in this video. I'll end with this. Again, here's some images of some books I'm looking for. I don't want to buy them right now. I'm reading some other stuff, and these are not at the top of my list, but they are on my radar, and I very much want to find them. I've been reading as much material with regard to the church as I can. Not just news reports, not just documentaries and videos and whatnot, but I've been reading and academic articles from a number of different directions in English and Spanish, positive and not positive about the church. But I've been reading those things. I'm looking for more. I want to create a very dense bibliography, and I do have one. But here are some books that I'm still looking for. Let me know if you want to buy these from me, or let me know if you have an even cheaper copy that I can acquire, get my hands on. The two books are Ataviada para Dios, Esclarecida para el Mundo, Ética Económica en la Luz del Mundo by I forget who this person is. I can't remember their name. I think it was Pedro, Antonio, something like that. That's here on the left, and then here on the right is another image from Amazon. This book is $67. It is La Luz del Mundo. It is a book by Eliel Masferrer Khan, and this is from 1997. And I guess this is from a series of different books. And I'm looking for this. I'm not willing to pay $67 for it right now. It was not listed, and it was not obtainable or findable online up until now. But yeah, I'm not willing to pay this right now. Let me know if you have this at a cheaper copy. I want to acquire this. And then the previous book that I was talking about is $30. Another thing I'm looking for is La Luz del Mundo magazines and ephemera and other written and published material. Like, for example, I'm looking for a pamphlet by Elsa Lopez Maldonado from the 1990s, which is a book or an article in response to René de la Torre and her book Hijos de la Luz, which came out in 1995 on La Luz del Mundo. It's a must read. It's very interesting. I wish I'd known about it much earlier than I did, but let me know what you think about this video. Again, be sure to engage with this video in all the ways that are free and appreciated and help to support this content. Like, subscribe, comment, etc. Send me an email. Give me some pointers or ideas that you want. Give some questions or ideas for a video that I could do. I will see you all later. Thank you for this.